Welcome back, everybody. We're diving into English pronunciation today.
It's a big one.
It is a big one. We've got a ton of resources
Yeah.
that we're going to be pulling from. And for anyone out there who's thinking about improving their pronunciation, we've got you covered.
Absolutely.
And it's not just about, trying to erase your accent or anything like that. It's about
clarity.
Yeah.
And expression and just being able to use your voice in a way that you feel confident in.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people get, maybe intimidated by the thought of, all the different sounds in English. One of our sources mentions there are 44 unique sounds.
That's a lot.
In the English language.
Yeah.
So do we really need to, master every single one of those?
I mean, you don't have to master every single sound at once.
Okay.
But it's definitely good to be aware of them.
Yeah.
And how they work.
So some of the sources mentioned, these things like phonemes and the IPA chart.
Yeah.
Can you break those down for us? What are those all about?
So phonemes are like the building blocks of words, the individual sounds.
Yeah.
And the IPA chart is kind of like a map
of
all of those sounds. So it shows you how to make the sounds, where to put your tongue, what to do with your teeth.
Okay.
All that kind of stuff.
So the IPA chart is like a pronunciation roadmap.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
One thing I've always been curious about is mimicking native speakers.
Yeah.
You hear that a lot, I just try to imitate how native speakers say things, but that can kind of feel awkward.
It can. Yeah. Like, what if you don't want to sound exactly like someone else?
You don't have to do a perfect impersonation.
Okay.
You can just sort of pick and choose the things that you like.
Maybe you hear someone with a really nice rhythm, and you think, I'd like to sound a little more like that.
Yeah. I was reading in one of the sources, some examples like simple phrases like, how are you today? Or could you help me, please? Just starting with these basic things and, mimicking the intonation, the rhythm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Just get a feel for it.
So one thing that always trips me up is syllable stress.
Oh, yeah.
Why is it photograph, but photographer and then photographic? It's
it's so confusing.
Right.
It's really one of the trickiest things about English.
Yeah.
But it's all about the rhythm of the language.
Okay.
So English is what's called a stress-timed language.
Okay.
Which means that we tend to emphasize certain syllables in a word.
Okay.
And that can change the meaning.
Right, like in those examples.
Exactly,
okay.
Yeah.
So it's not just about the individual sounds, it's about how they
all work together.
Exactly. It's like the music of the language.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm really interested to dive into this section about the most commonly mispronounced sounds.
Yeah.
I'm sure we all have our...
We all have our favorites.
Yeah.
I mean, our least favorites.
Yeah, like the T sound is always a tough one.
That one gets a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. R and L can be tricky.
Yeah, and even some vowel combinations ship versus sheep.
All right.
So I'm curious, what are your tips for tackling those sounds?
Well, one thing you can do is just practice them in isolation.
Okay.
Just say the sound over and over again until you get it right.
Okay.
And then you can start incorporating them into words and sentences.
Yeah.
And another thing is to really exaggerate the sounds.
Oh, okay.
At first.
Yeah.
Just to kind of get your mouth used to making them.
To really over-enunciate.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
It might feel silly.
Yeah.
But it works.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing that really surprised me as I was reading through all these materials is this idea of connected speech.
Oh, yeah.
I had no idea that native speakers blend words together.
All the time.
So much.
All the time, yeah.
Did you becomes did ya.
Exactly.
Wow. It's like a whole nother language.
I know. It's like a secret code.
Yeah.
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 But once you understand it, it makes English so much easier to understand and to speak.
Okay. So speaking of things that are hard to understand.
Okay.
Intonation.
Oh, yes.
I feel like I'm always kind of...
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you break down intonation in a way that's easy to grasp?
So intonation is basically the music of your voice.
Okay.
So it's the rise and fall of your pitch as you're speaking.
Okay.
And it can convey a lot of meaning.
Yeah.
If you say something with a rising intonation, it sounds like a question.
But if you say it with a falling intonation,
Yeah.
it sounds like a statement.
Gotcha.
So it's really important for conveying your meaning.
So it's like adding punctuation to your speech.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is making me think about my high school French class where we used to do all these tongue twisters.
Oh, yeah.
Like, she sells seashells by the seashore. I can still say it.
Nice.
So are those actually helpful?
They can be.
Okay.
Yeah, they're good for practicing specific sounds
Yeah.
and getting your mouth moving
Right.
in the right way.
Oh.
So yeah, I would say they're helpful.
Cool. Any other favorite tongue twisters you can share with us?
How about, how much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood?
Oh, my goodness.
Try saying that 5 times fast.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's good practice.
One thing I've tried to do that I found really helpful is recording myself speaking, which feels weird at first. Then when you hear it back, it's like, oh,
right.
I didn't realize I was doing that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good way to kind of get an objective view
Mm-hmm.
of how you sound.
Yeah.
And you can compare yourself to native speakers.
Right.
Listen to how they say things and see where you're different.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much technology can really play a role in
Absolutely.
improving pronunciation.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, there are some really cool apps mentioned in these sources too.
There are.
Like Elsa Speak,
Yes.
Forvo Youglish.
Yeah, those are all great.
Can you tell us a little bit about them?
So Elsa Speak is really good for getting personalized feedback
Okay.
on your pronunciation.
Mm-hmm.
So it listens to you speak.
Wow.
And it tells you what you're doing well
Okay.
and what you need to work on.
Cool.
And then Forvo is like a pronunciation dictionary.
Okay.
So you can look up any word and hear how it's pronounced by native speakers.
Cool.
And then Youglish is really cool because it lets you search for words and phrases
Wow.
in YouTube videos.
Oh, that's awesome.
So you can hear how real people are using them.
In context.
In context, exactly.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So we've got all these resources. It sounds like it really comes down to practice and consistency.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if it's just a little bit every day. Right.
Yeah, even 15 minutes a day
Yeah.
can make a big difference.
Cool. And feedback too, right?
Feedback is essential.
Yeah. But what if you don't have like a teacher or a language partner,
right?
Who could give you feedback?
Well, you can always ask friends or family.
Okay.
Or you can find a language exchange partner online.
Okay.
There are lots of websites and apps that connect language learners.
Gotcha.
So you can find someone who's learning your language and you can help each other out.
Okay, cool. So, as we're talking about all this, I'm thinking, there are so many different accents and dialects of English.
Mm-hmm.
So is there really one right way?
That's a great question. And it's something that linguists have been debating for a long time.
Yeah.
I think the answer is that there isn't really one right way to pronounce English.
Yeah.
It's more about being understood and communicating effectively.
Right.
So as long as you're doing that,
Yeah.
then your pronunciation is fine.
Okay.
You know.
And we're going to
dive deeper.
Yeah, we're going to dive deeper into that. In the next part.
Absolutely.
Of our deep dive.
Yeah.
So we were talking about how there's really one right way to pronounce English.
Yeah, like, is there a right way to speak English?
Right.
I mean, it depends what you mean by right.
Yeah, what should people be aiming for then if it's not,
right,
you know, this kind of perfect pronunciation?
Well, I think the goal should be clarity. You know, you want to be understood.
Right.
And you want to be able to communicate effectively.
Right.
So I think as long as you're doing that,
mm-hmm.
then your pronunciation is fine.
So it's more about being understood than sounding a certain way.
Exactly.
And of course, there are certain situations where you might want to adjust your pronunciation a little bit.
Like job interview or
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or if you're giving a presentation.
Right.
But for the most part, I think it's more important to just be yourself.
Okay.
And to speak in a way that feels natural to you.
I was reading in one of the sources, you know, is talking about how some linguists would say that, you know, actually having all these different accents and dialects.
It enriches the language?
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it shows the diversity of English speakers. Right, in all the different places where it's spoken around the world.
Exactly. Yeah, and it reflects the history of the language as well.
So how do you navigate this like huge landscape of all these different accents and pronunciations?
Well, I think the best thing you can do is to just expose yourself to as many different accents as possible.
Like how?
You know, listen to podcasts, watch movies, talk to people from different parts of the world.
Right.
And just kind of get used to hearing different ways of speaking.
So it's like training your ear to be more flexible.
Yeah. And adaptable.
And then I guess you can kind of cherry pick.
Yeah.
You know, things that you like from those different accents.
Yes. Yeah. And you can even try to imitate them.
Yeah.
You know, if you hear something that you like.
Yeah.
You can try to practice it yourself.
You know, it's funny. As we're talking about all this like technical stuff,
right?
I'm thinking about like the emotional side of things too.
Oh, yeah.
Like confidence.
Confidence is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you feel confident about your pronunciation, you're more likely to speak up.
Right.
You're more likely to engage in conversations.
And I know for me, like if I'm not feeling confident about my pronunciation, I kind of hold back.
I totally get that.
You know?
Yeah. It can be really intimidating.
So how do you build that confidence?
Well, I think one thing is to just focus on progress.
Okay.
Not perfection.
Right.
You know, don't worry about making mistakes.
Yeah.
Just try to improve a little bit every day.
Right.
And celebrate your successes.
Yeah. To like giving yourself permission to make those mistakes.
Exactly. Yeah. Because you're going to make mistakes. Yeah. Everybody does.
That's how you learn.
That's how you learn. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Okay.
And don't be afraid to sound silly.
Right.
You know, just have fun with it.
One of the things I was reading was talking about using humor to kind of help with your pronunciation.
Humor's great.
Right.
You know, it can help you to relax.
Yeah.
It can help you to not take yourself so seriously.
Right.
And it can just make the whole process more enjoyable.
I'm trying to think of an example. Like, how would you use humor to?
Well, you could watch comedies.
Oh, okay.
You know, in English.
Mm-hmm.
And pay attention to how the actors are using their voices.
Right.
You know how they're using intonation, how they're using stress.
Right.
And you can even try to imitate them.
Oh, right.
You know, just for fun.
Yeah.
And another thing you can do is just to laugh at yourself when you make mistakes.
Yeah. Don't take it too seriously.
Don't take it too seriously. Exactly. Yeah. Just have a good time with it.
I remember I used to watch a lot of British comedies.
Oh, yeah.
And I would try to imitate the accents.
It's fun.
Yeah, and it really helped, I think.
Yeah, it can definitely help.
So we've got all these tips and techniques. We've talked about, you know, the technical side, the emotional side.
Right.
But how do we actually put it all together and see results?
Well, that's the $1,000,000 question.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to talk about in the next part of our deep dive.
All right. So we've talked about all these great tips and tricks.
Yeah.
But how do we actually, you know, put it all together and see results?
So you want to actually improve your pronunciation. How do you do that? Well, I think the key to have a plan.
Okay.
To be consistent and to get feedback.
All right. So break that down for us.
Okay. So first, having a plan. You know, what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve?
Like, what are my weak spots?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
You know, so maybe you have trouble with the thought sound.
Right.
Or maybe you have trouble with intonation.
Yeah.
So figure out what your weaknesses are.
Gotcha.
And then you can focus on those.
So target those areas.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then consistency. I mean,
consistency,
I know that's important for like everything.
It is.
But especially, you know, when you're trying to learn something new.
It's so important.
Yeah.
You know, even if you can just practice for 15 minutes a day.
Okay.
That's better than practicing for 2 hours once a week.
Right. Little and often.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Little and often.
Any tips for staying motivated?
Well, I think the key is to make it fun.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
Don't think of it as a chore.
Right.
Think of it as something that you enjoy doing.
Like, you know, you could watch movies in English. Yeah. You could listen to music in English.
Right.
You could read books in English.
Okay.
You know, there are all sorts of things you can do.
So find things that you like.
Exactly.
And just incorporate it into those activities.
Yeah, make it a part of your life.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then feedback, right? That was the third thing.
That's so important.
But what if you don't have a teacher?
Right.
You know, or someone who can give you feedback?
I mean, there are lots of ways to get feedback.
Okay.
you can record yourself speaking.
What's next about that?
Yeah, and then listen back to it.
Yeah.
You can use apps.
Right.
There are lots of apps out there.
Like the ones we talked about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can also find a language partner online.
Right.
There are lots of people who are looking for language partners.
Cool. So use all the tools available.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Use all the tools available.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
About pronunciation.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
I would just say, don't give up.
Okay.
It's a journey. It's not a destination.
Right.
There will be times when you feel frustrated. There will be times when you feel like you're not making progress.
Right.
But just keep going.
Yeah.
The more you practice,
the
better you'll get.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a fantastic deep dive.
It has been fun.
Thank you so much for sharing all your insights with us.
My pleasure.
And to everyone listening out there, thank you for joining us on this pronunciation journey. And remember, keep practicing.
Keep practicing.
Keep experimenting. And we'll see you next time.
See you next time.